So I'm from the class of 2002 MDI Gurgaon, which means me, my batchmates, we've been working for 20 plus years, and when I speak to them, what often comes out is that many of us don't know when to stop. Don't take me literally there, but what I mean is we don't have too much of an idea at what stage, at what point in our lives have we collected enough financial resources to stop working actively for an income, and we have the time and courage to dedicate ourselves to projects and activities that we've always wanted to. It's something I have thought of too many times, and I'm sure some of you watching this video would have been in that position as well. It's a tough one to answer, but an important one, and in this video, I'll be taking you through a couple of methods that can help you arrive at that magic number. Let's begin. When it comes to finding a retirement number, the typical starting point is intuition, and many would just cook up a number ranging from 2 crores to 100 crores with practically little understanding of their future income, expenses, and financial goals. A more improved approach is to use those retirement calculators one can find on most financial websites, and in my case, the corpus I have been suggested to aim for if I want to retire at the age of 50 is between 6.5 to 8.5 crores. So that's definitely a better starting point, and given the importance of this number, we need to go a bit further. So let's start with the first technique, which is a popular one and is called the 4% rule. This rule was first proposed by a financial planner named William Bengen, and very simply it says if a retiree were to withdraw 4% of his or her retirement corpus annually, then even after adjusting for inflation, that nest egg would last at least 30 years. To put it more practically, and the way I see it, is the inverse of 4% is 25 times, which means if my estimated annual expenses in the first year of retirement is say 10 lakhs, then per the 4% rule, a corpus of 2.5 crores should be sufficient to take me through my retirement years. Actually, since I had taken 1.5 lakhs as my current monthly expenses in all the calculators and I had pegged my retirement age at 50, my monthly expenses 7 years from now at an inflation of 7% would come to 2.4 lakhs, and 25 times of that gives me a targeted corpus of 7.2 crores. But let's understand how this model works and what are the limitations of it. Now remember, I said this 4% withdrawal rate is inflation adjusted, which means if my first year's expenses are 2.4 lakhs, then the withdrawal allowed in the second year is 2.4 plus some additional amount on account of inflation. So this is actually a good thing because the model allows for cost escalation, but because this model was built around 30 years back and it was based on US conditions, it assumes an inflation rate of just 3 to 4%, which is certainly not adequate for Indian conditions. So that's limitation number one for this model. The second issue with the 4% rule is that it is not a universal rule. What I mean is, while this thumb rule works efficiently in a standard retirement scenario, that is, when people are in their late 50s or 60s with a settled level of spending, however, the model doesn't do as well for someone in their 30s and 40s who prefers a more flexible lifestyle with much of the expenses going towards discretionary activities like traveling, dining, and socializing. So the problem with the 4% rule is that it is very rigid and doesn't offer the flexibility that a younger person would prefer to have. A third consideration is on how the retirement corpus should be invested, and Mr. Bengen models the 4% rule around a 60-40 split between equities and bonds. In that context, he used the then long-term average annual returns of 10% and 5.3% for equities and bonds respectively, which is definitely no longer the case neither in the US nor in India. Actually, I want to take this point a bit further and explain the impact of timing on this model with an example. So we'll assume three different scenarios. So as usual, Amar, Akbar and Anthony, who are all 50 years of age and have retired with a corpus of 1 crore rupees. Since all three have read Mr. Bengen's 4% rule, they've also settled for a 4% withdrawal rate, with the only difference being that each of them have constructed their investment portfolio differently, and therefore there are big variations in the yearly returns that they have achieved. For instance, Amar has a very strong start and an extremely bad ending, but pleasantly his 1 crore corpus would have lasted him the entire 30-year period. Akbar's investments were a lot more conservative with returns ranging between 6 and 10%, which again ensured that the money lasted the entire 30 years, although he might have struggled a bit financially had he lived an extra 1 year longer. And finally, there's Anthony, who had a bad start to his investment journey, and along the way he closed with some strong performance numbers. And notice how his retirement corpus goes into negative territory in the 10th year itself. In other words, the 4% rule, or for that matter, any retirement model, is likely to have a timing issue, which is why I strongly recommend a retirement portfolio should be constructed differently from a wealth creation portfolio, and one should keep risk management and volatility at the core of it. Anyways, to recap, the 4% rule has its fair share of limitations. Its withdrawal rate rigidity, the timing issue with investments. Remember, we have not included taxes, which will bring down your withdrawals. And most importantly, today's economy has seen big changes in interest rates and inflation as compared to the 1990s, which again makes the 4% rule a slightly tough tool to incorporate, at least in its original form. Now, having said this, I did come across some modifications to this approach, and what most financial planners recommend is some flexibility on the withdrawal rate. For example, in Anthony's case and in the second year itself, the withdrawal rate as a percentage of the available corpus goes up to 6%, which is certainly a warning sign, and unless stopped, this can easily spiral to an emptying of the retirement corpus. So the makeshift solution here is to moderate the withdrawal amount, and instead of the original projection of 4.28 lakhs at a 4% withdrawal, the retiree should now be looking at withdrawing a lower expense amount of 2.85 lakhs. This is obviously not an ideal situation, but by regulating the withdrawal percentage, the retiree can extend his or her corpus by a few more years, at least in this situation. My point is, the 4% thumb rule is too simplistic, and one should look at it more as a broad guideline. But don't ignore it, because we still are talking about big money here, crores of rupees, and if you're a little unsure on how to manage and grow your money, then do explore availing the services of Fisdom's private wealth team. With over 100 wealth managers spread across 32 Indian cities, Fisdom uses a combination of technology and human experience to ensure correctness of advice, disruptive pricing to make it affordable, convenience and control over your portfolio with a real-time customizable dashboard, the option of adding family members, unique insights, in-depth reports, and much more. So be it equities with PMS, direct equity or mutual funds, debt instruments like bonds and corporate fixed deposits, alternative investments including private equity, and even insurance, the team at Fisdom Private Wealth is equipped to handle most of your needs. For more information or to talk to a wealth manager, please do fill in this form with all details, and as always, the link is attached to this video's description. The second approach I came across in our quest for finding the ideal retirement corpus uses an Excel sheet. It's a lot more customizable to individual needs, and it also takes care of some of the problems we saw with the 4% rule. So it's a lot better than the 4% thumb rule, and I first saw it in a video by Ankur Wariku, which is in Hindi, and I think this is a good one for everyone to go through. The primary idea here is to map out your future expenses over your entire lifetime, and you don't have to be super precise, but you should have a fair idea on what categories and how much are you likely to be spending on different categories from now until the day you die in your 80s or 90s. Personally, I have a very strange expense pattern, so I borrowed a list from my 45-year-old neighbor, and in his case, there's house EMI, school fees, groceries, household expenses, electricity and water bills, salary to the household help and driver, car-related expenses, insurance, eating out, and so on. We worked together on this. We figured out the timelines for each entry. We allowed for specific timelines like EMI and child-related expenses, which will stop after a few years. There are annual cost escalations, so item-wise inflation that we incorporated. And we also captured any one-time planned expenses, which in my neighbor's case was a big outgo on his twin daughter's college expenses. The next step was to map these expenses for every year all the way until the age of 90, which my neighbor reckons is going to be his last year on this planet. This then gives us the cost this household is expected to incur every year for the next 45 years. and what is an annual expense of 25 lakhs now is slated to increase to about 5.5 crores by the time my neighbor reaches 90 years of age. In fact, when I summed up all these expenses, it comes to an astonishing 68.25 crores, which is the amount my neighbor has to potentially spend over the next 45 years. Now, this is a big number, but as you and I would have experienced it a few times before, we are not very good at estimating expenses, and more often than not, we end up spending more than what we had projected for. This is where building a margin of safety is important, and in this case I have applied a cushion of 20%, which means what was 68 crores is now a little over 81 crores in expenses. But this doesn't mean we need to build a corpus of 81 crores, and that's because the corpus, the investment we start with initially or in the early years, will get an opportunity to compound and grow over time, and for the purposes of our calculations, I've kept it at just 8%. Actually, I had initially kept it at 10%, assuming a mix of debt and equity, which is how our portfolios are generally constructed, but then we have to factor taxation as well, and I think 8% is a very realistic number to have. Which means the last thing we need from a worksheet exercise is the exact portfolio amount my neighbor needs to have today if he wants to retire now and have all his visible future expenses taken care of. In other words, and what I've done here, I've assumed that from now until the age of 90, my neighbor would be able to pay every rupee of expenses. And at the age of 90, the tank will be completely empty. That is, the balance in the retirement corpus will be a nice big round zero. The zero thing was my neighbor's idea, and I think this guy is absolutely sorted. And even I'll want that when I die, I should have used up all my money, enjoyed my life, and hopefully have some bank RM desperately calling me to add funds into my savings account as the balance has gone below the average quarterly balance. Anyways, to find this precise number, that is the retirement corpus you need to have now, one can use the GoalSeek facility, and for more clarity on this, please refer to the worksheet I have linked in this video's description, which also includes a supporting video that explains how a GoalSeek function works. If this part is done, then this concludes our entire exercise, and at the end of it, we'll have our current retirement number, which in this example comes to 9.96 crores. Understandably, it's a function of your expenses, your age, your life expectancy, the post-tax returns, inflation rate, etc. And because your needs will be different to mine or my neighbors, please use the downloadable and customizable worksheet that's available in the video's description. Now, honestly, I could have simplified this elaborate Excel as well, but I didn't because I really wanted everyone to go through the entire cost projection exercise, and I think that's the more accurate way of doing it. However, if you are a very busy person, then FYI, here's a simple 5-step process. Step 1, and it starts by calculating the number of years you have to retire, and in my neighbor's case, this comes to 15 years. Step 2 is to estimate your current yearly expenses and apply a standard inflation rate of say 7% to arrive at the projected expenses at the time of retirement. So in our example, this is just under 70 lakhs when my neighbor reaches the age of 60. Step 3 is where we calculate the post-retirement tax and inflation adjusted return, which in our example comes to 0.93%. Next up, estimate the number of years in your post-retirement life, and in my neighbor's case, it's 90 minus 60, so 30 years. And finally, step 5 is the calculation of the retirement corpus, which basically assumes a payment of 69.8 lakhs plus inflation that has to be made every year for the next 30 years. This gives us a present value of 18.2 crores, which is almost double of what we had calculated using the Excel method. I'm sure you can now understand why that's the case. This 5-step method is too simplified, it's very linear, it doesn't take into account specific changes in expense patterns, etc. And that's why I prefer using the Excel-based method, which won't take you more than 30 minutes to figure out. So give these 3 methods a shot, and I sincerely hope this video serves as a good starting point to the achievement of your retirement goals. If you found this video useful, then do share it with your friends and connections. Do like this video, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you 3 days from now. Until then.